Hello, everyone.
Hi there, guys. This is Rita,
This is Amanda, and you're listening to I Don't Know Her.
the podcast about women that you've probably never heard of, but you should have. And today you will.
So we have in Eastern Washington, specifically Spokane County, we have now moved into phase 2.
Phase 2
of reopening. So I'm going to have Rita explain kind of what phase 2 looks like, especially for her, because it's a lot more complicated than it is for me.
So phase 2 for me as a server in a restaurant, we're allowed to have 50% capacity, and we had to put barriers up everywhere. So the owners built with 2x4s and plexiglass actual barriers in between tables and in front of our bar where you come up and order. They're kind of hanging from 2 chains and they're suspended in the air because we couldn't really do it to the bar because you got to slide people's drinks across and stuff like that. So we needed it up off the counter. We also have to wear gloves, which we've been doing anyway, masks. We have to sanitize everything. We have to go to the bathroom and sanitize the bathroom every 30 minutes and keep a log. We have to keep a log of customers' names and phone numbers. We have to...
Now that's voluntary, though.
It
correct?
is. We just leave the book on the counter and there's a pen there. And we're just like, if it's there, it's in big black letters. If you want to sign it, go for it.
Initially, that was supposed to be mandatory, but they changed that, right?
Yeah, I think they did. Too many people were not happy with that one.
Yeah.
And also, we can't have more than 5 people to a table. So we had like this big giant communal table in the center of our room, and we just had to take the chairs away. So there's like this big table in the middle of the room. And also like the tables that people can't use, we put a big red X on them. It just looks like a freaking weird place to be now. And even the guys in the kitchen are all masked up. They have been. And I feel so bad for them. They're just like constantly red in the face and just like pitting out because it's already so hot. And then adding a mask on top of that, it's hard for them to breathe.
Yeah.
And cook over a stove.
Yeah, that would be really hard. But like, I think a lot of cafeteria workers have already been doing that anyway.
Yeah. And constant glove changing. Every time I touch money, I change my gloves. Every time I sanitize a table, I change my gloves. So the gloves thing is going to be a freaking nightmare. All of those are going in the garbage. But I get it. I understand.
Yeah.
Customers, like we've been doing a great job. There are some customers that are not doing such a great job. They're being assholes.
Yeah. Well, and since I'm not a server in the industry, I know that the rule is supposed to be that when I walk into establishments, I'm supposed to be wearing a mask when I'm not at my table. Mm-hmm. Like when you're at your table with your 4 friends or whatever, you can take your masks off so you can eat and things like that. But when you're out of your seat, you should have your mask on. So when you walk in, when you're ordering, if it's at a countertop, if you're going to the bathroom, what have you, you should have your mask on. Mm-hmm. We visited 2 establishments since we hit phase 2. One was a local LGBTQ bar called 9.
Awesome.
Which we love and wanted to support. They were amazing. You walk in and there's the hand sanitizing station when you walk in the door.
Nice.
They actually took out 50% of their seating and put all of the tables 8 feet apart, the remaining ones. And there's a max of 4 chairs at each of them.
Nice.
And they also blocked the bar so people can't walk up to the bar because they're only doing tableside service because they want to minimize interactions. All of the servers are, of course, wearing, gloves and masks and things like that. They were very attentive, very cheery, very happy to see people in. That was a really great experience. We went to another establishment that was trying their best, I think, but it was a much smaller space.
Yeah, that's hard.
And so you were like way too close together. We tried to sit on the patio to try to be less like with people, but the patio was very cold that day.
Oh no.
It just wasn't a sustainable seating solution for me.
Amanda gets really chilly.
I do. I cannot get warm. So we moved inside and like there had been 2 glasses there and I didn't realize that when I first was heading into the table. And one of the servers came by and was like, oh, okay, I'll get those. And then I was like waiting for him to clean off the table, but he didn't.
Oh.
Yeah. There was hand sanitizer on the table, so I just sprayed it on the table. And I was like, okay, well, that's what I'm going to do to try to like minimize the spread of germs because this guy didn't wipe off the table, which I thought was really fucking weird. Like even on a normal day, you would wipe off the table in between service.
Yeah, that's the norm.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, like I could see water or like condensation or whatever from their glasses on the table and they didn't clean it.
That's not good.
So, but everybody was wearing masks. So, and that was serving, but I will say that like no one besides us were really wearing masks when we were getting up from the table and stuff of the customers in the room.
We've gotten, I would say most are very, very patient. They're very kind. They're being nice about it. There are some that are not. And there was a gentleman that came in and he tried to get close to me as a joke. And he's like, ha, 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 am I getting too close to you? And he didn't have a mask on. So I had to physically back up away from him. And he's like, oh, all of this is so silly. And I was like, and I can't say anything. I'm just like, okay, well, what can I do for you? Trying to be helpful. I had a group of women that came in and the barriers that are plexiglass, they touched it and they pushed it aside so they could lean over the counter closer to me.
What the fuck? Why?
I don't know. Because they want to put their elbows on the bar and they want to order. And I was like, actually, that's on a chain and that's kind of a little, I'm afraid of it falling. So if you could not touch it, I kind of made it so that it wasn't me saying, hey, can you get behind the barrier?
Hey, can you respect the boundaries I've placed up here?
Yeah. And actually, they weren't the only people that did that. There were other people that touched it and moved it aside. And I'm like, why does that make sense? It doesn't.
Yeah, that doesn't make any, like, why are you moving barriers? Like, the barrier is there for a fucking reason.
Exactly.
I don't know.
It's interesting times.
It really is. But I will say that neither place that we went to had a log or told us there was a log or asked us to sign into a log. Because we would have. But neither of the places we went to even had it as an option.
Yeah, that's kind of scary.
Yeah, I know. I thought so too, because the whole point of it is that you're saying I'm okay if like somebody wants to contact me in case there was somebody who got sick. Like when we were at 9, there were 2 customers who were sitting at a table behind us. Mm-hmm. And what if one of them found out 5 days from now that he had COVID and we were at 9 at the same time and he was asymptomatic? You know, mm-hmm. Like I would like to be contacted and know that we came in contact so then I could go get tested. So that's the whole point of the contact log mm-hmm. is to make sure that they can do contact tracing. So not even being asked to sign up for the log is a little weird, I think. Like I understand people who don't want to sign it.
Yeah.
I understand you don't want some nebulous government entity being able to know exactly where you are. However, I would just say you're carrying a tracker in your pocket at all times. So like get over it.
Deal?
Like if you're putting it on paper, that paper's going to get lost. Also, so nobody's going to give a shit about the paper, but they're always going to know where you are from your phone.
Yeah. Even with ordering online or over the phone, we already have your name and your phone number and your email. Like,
yeah,
it's not too crazy of an idea, but
well, and also it's paper. Like it's a paper log. So like no shit, that will be just dismissed. It'll just eventually go away. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're having people sign a paper log, that's going to get lost or, you know, recycled, whatever, shredded. But like those electronic logs are forever.
Yeah.
So I think it's silly the people who are like pissed about that when they have a tracking device in their pocket at all times and then pull out and complain on Facebook about having to fill out a form when Facebook is literally mining their data and selling it for profit. Like, you just, if you cared about privacy, you wouldn't be on social media.
Exactly.
Or have a phone.
I am super happy to see people again, though. It's really nice.
Me too.
But it's so awkward. Everybody's really heightened right now. Some people are a little aggressive, which is hard to deal with.
Not helpful.
Not helpful. So I've just been playing it as it goes every day. Just doing my job.
I'm still so curious as to what life is going to be like in the next couple of months once we've, I don't know, like here in Spokane, right as they were allowing us to go into phase 2, I don't know if you know this, Rita, but like literally the day they announced we were moving into phase 2, within an hour, they announced that we also had 28 new cases in a day.
Yeah,
it was our biggest one-day jump since April.
Uh-oh.
And in the course of 48 hours, we had 31 new cases.
See, and that makes me nervous because, I am doing my job. And if people are not helping, on either side and all sides, I'm exposed every day. And I'm a little scared, to be honest. I'm a little worried.
Yeah. I don't like, in listeners, in case you can't already tell, we're still long distance. Even though we're technically allowed to be with up to 4 people, they advise against being with somebody outside of your home in a confined space.
Which is how we podcast.
Yeah. Like we literally lock ourselves in a small room and we're very close together when we podcast. So for us, that still is a violation of what they suggest. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to be really good about keeping ourselves and our families safe. And when I do venture out and go see people, I want to feel comfortable that I'm not going to get those people sick because you and I decided that we could podcast in my closet together.
And I'm in my dining room.
So, right now we're continuing to do this long distance and it's working out okay for us. So, thank you to Lucas, who continues to remove all of the awkward pauses when we're socially distanced over the internet, and also making sure that like our mess ups get taken out because we constantly mess up. I think a lot more than we do when we're recording in person.
It's hard. It is hard to do it because we're looking at a screen right now,
and it's a little time delayed, so it's so easy to talk over one another, which is what I was just going to say, and did it as I was saying it. Sorry, Lucas. Okay, are we ready for our ladies? Do you know who Stephanie St. Clair is?
I don't know her.
Good. She was one of the most successful independent crime bosses of the 20th century.
Hey-o.
Yeah. So Stephanie St. Clair was born on December 24th, Christmas Eve, in 1897 in the French West Indies, in what is now present-day Guadeloupe. So she is in the French West Indies. So she did grow up speaking French. Not much is known about her real early life. She did have some kind of education because she could read and write, which was unusual for a Black woman of that era, even in the French West Indies. When she was 15, her mother fell ill and Stephanie left school to get a job to make sure to help keep her family financially afloat. And she was working as a housekeeper for a really rich family. And according to some sources, not everything I read included this, but I didn't know if that was because they just felt like it wasn't necessary to include. But the family that she worked for had a son, and the son repeatedly raped her while she was working as their housekeeper. But she stayed in the job and saved her money up. And then after her mother died, she was able to pull together enough money to leave Guadeloupe. And that was in 1911. And she sailed on a boat called the Guyana, which took this really roundabout way to get to the United States. She actually had to go through France. So she actually, when she arrived in the United States, she told everybody she actually came from France. She also told everybody that instead of being born in Guadalupe, she said she was from Martinique, which was like a little more hoity-toity area.
Okay.
So she really tried to like spin some tall tales. So on this really extended journey, the way that the boat came, she ended up teaching herself English on this months-long journey on this boat. So that when she arrived in New York, she had some English, and she also could speak some Spanish. So she was really a very intelligent person.
Yeah.
To have mastered 2 languages and was able to partially converse in Spanish. So she actually knew 3 languages. But when she arrived in New York City, she was just 14 years old. Like I did the math, because at first nobody really talked about her age. And I was like, 1911. She was only born in 1897. Holy shit, she was like 13 when she started this trip.
Holy shit, that is so young to be traveling by yourself.
Mm-hmm. So the next part I'm going to tell you about was written in Wikipedia, but I couldn't find anybody else who really talked about it. But the reference, the citation in Wikipedia said that this was from a book that had been written about her. So, but it was written in French. So I couldn't like verify it. And I don't know if a lot of English, because she mostly was, her life was mostly spent in the United States. So most of the things that I had were from when she arrived. But there was this part that they said happened in this book, that when she first came to the United States, she met and fell in love with a man who was a small-time criminal. And one of the things he did is that he also dabbled in prostitution as a pimp. And he tried to force Stephanie into sex work. And she was not having it. And she seems like she was, from the get-go, a pretty feisty person.
Yeah.
She was actually really pissed at him for suggesting that she do sex work. And she stabbed him in the eye with a fork.
Oh, fuck. That's pretty brutal. That's not feisty. That is brutal.
But it's like I can't imagine what the actual situation was when a 14-year-old would do that.
Well, I'm imagining
she must
her
have felt pretty
past.
desperate.
She's not wanting that to happen again, I'm assuming.
Right.
Yeah.
And it says that after this, she tried to leave New York City, and I think she was headed south, which I don't think she understood was not a great idea at the time.
No.
Because this is like Jim Crow era, KKK ruling the South time. So she gets on a bus, and on the bus ride leaving New York, the KKK actually stopped the bus because they knew it was full of black passengers. And allegedly, they really did some horrific things to the passengers on this bus, including her. Some people were hanged, some people were raped, and some people were burned.
Oh my gosh.
By the KKK.
Oh.
So after that, Stephanie immediately returned to New York City because it did have a thriving black community, especially in Harlem. And when she returned and got back to Harlem, she found that her boyfriend, the one who had wanted her to do sex work, had actually been shot and killed in a gang fight. So she was like without direction and somehow stumbled into becoming involved with a gang called the 40 Thieves. Have you heard of that before?
No.
I knew it as like Alibaba and the 40 Thieves.
Well, that's where my mind went to, but I didn't hear about this one in New York.
Yeah, so that was where they got their name from, was from the Alibaba story. But it was actually the 40 Thieves were like this really notorious gang that had been around for more than a century, because it's the 20th century at this point, and they'd been around since the 19th century. Remember the movie Gangs of New York? Martin Scorsese's film.
Oh, yeah.
Has Leonardo DiCaprio in it.
Yeah.
And it's like those Irish gangs that are fighting.
Yeah.
That's the 40 Thieves.
Oh, wow.
So she started to become involved with the 40 Thieves, and they were a very notoriously violent gang, and they were almost entirely white, almost all Irish people in the gangs. And despite the fact that she was black and was a woman, somehow she ingratiated herself into the 40 Thieves and eventually became one of the leaders of the 40 Thieves.
Wow, where does that ever happen?
I don't know. Let me just tell you that I think that this woman's life story from start to finish would be an incredible television show on like HBO.
Kind of like how Peaky Blinders is, but with her story. Definitely. Yeah.
I mean, Peaky Blinders meets The Sopranos, but it's with black people.
Oh, I would love that.
Right? So I think this would be a phenomenal television show, like a serial television show. So, because I mean, you could talk about like a whole first part of the whole first season could be like her trip to the United States and her experiences, and then being with the 40 Thieves, and that could be the end of the first season. And we haven't even gotten started on the good stuff. So while she's working with this gang, Stephanie actually is really good with money. So she manages to sock away some of the money she earns while she's part of this gang. Allegedly, in 1917, had saved $30,000.
Holy crap. That's a ton of money.
Lucas, what would that be in today's money?
$30,000 in 1917 is the equivalent of $607,981.39 in today's dollars.
So from that money, she decided to start her own crime syndicate, and she invested $10,000 of her own money into a lottery game, which was sometimes known as the numbers game. You might have heard in movies like I'm playing the numbers or I'm running a numbers game.
Oh, yeah.
Or it's sometimes called policy banking. So just FYI, within a year of running this numbers game that she started, Stephanie St. Clair's operation, and she was also known as Queenie or the Queen of Harlem or Madame St. Clair. She had made $500,000. Her enterprise had made $500,000 in a year, and by the end of that year had employed 50 people.
Wow, that's a lot.
So I was like, I don't really understand what a numbers game is. Like, I just hear it a lot on movies and television, and I thought I
heard it. I was like, is it like blackjack or?
It is nothing like what I thought. So bear with me. I am going to try to explain it in like layman's terms. But I will say that it is a lot more complicated than I thought it would be. I don't know how people came up with this shit, but like it's one, very smart, and two, complicated. Like I don't know how they were like, you know what we should do is these 25 steps. So I'm going to try to explain the numbers game, which in the case of Stephanie St. Clair and other people running numbers games in Harlem were also sometimes called policy banking. So I'll get to that at the end.
Okay.
So whoever ran the enterprise, in this case it's Stephanie, they would send bookies out who would collect bets and the names of the bettors. And remember, she, by the end of the first year, had 40 bookies.
Whoa. Yeah.
And if each of them are, let's say, visiting 10 bettors, then we have 4,000 bets coming in.
That's a lot.
And like on a single bet.
Jeez.
So folks who would participate, like let's say you were going to make a bet and I was the boss. I might send my wife Abby out as my bookie, and she would come to you and she would ask for your bet and for your money. And then she would collect those two things and bring them back to my enterprise. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. So folks would choose 3 numbers that they wanted to bet on. Just like if you walked into the convenience store and you wanted to get a lottery ticket, you could pick your 5 numbers or whatever. So in the case of the numbers game, it was a combination of 3 numbers, whatever you wanted your numbers to be if you were going to place a bet. So if I chose, let's say, my digits were 1, 2, 3, and I bet $1 on those as the winning combination. If those then won, generally the odds were 1 to 999. So if I picked the right 3 digits, I would win $1,000. It was pretty great.
Yeah.
But if there were 40 bookies and each of them visited 10 people, so that's 4,000, and each of us bet $1, then Queenie has $4,000 and only has to give me $1,000. So she makes $3,000 off of this one day of betting.
Wow, that's pretty good.
So each bookie was going to be in charge of keeping track of the bettor, their name, right, their amount, and their digits. And one of the things that her operation did that was really fucking smart is instead of the bookies walking around with a little book that actually kept track of that stuff, that's why they were called bookies.
Yeah.
She didn't have them use books. They used fucking newspapers, and they would write them like on the edges of the margins, each person's individual newspaper. So like if I went to your house, I would take your bet and your name on your newspaper, and then I would go to the next one. So there was less of the ability to get busted because it just looked like a stack of newspapers.
Crazy. That's good.
Instead of a betting book. So that was pretty smart on their part. So after the bookies go out and take the bets and the names and the money, they come back to the home base of the operations. Usually those were in a fake storefront, like a laundromat, and then in the back it's this betting operation, right?
Yeah.
So then Queenie employed people called comptrollers, and those people would handle the money and kept track of the books. So they would then take all of the information, put it in one spot, and she employed 10 comptrollers. So those are her 50 people, her 40 bookies, and her 10 comptrollers. So my biggest question was, I get that they're betting these numbers, but what are the numbers betting against? Like, how do they know they won or lost? Like, where are the numbers coming? Like when we play the state lottery or whatever.
Where's the proof of the numbers that were called?
Yes. Because in like a lottery, like if I go to play the Powerball, then the day of the Powerball drawing, we can like go on the internet or television and watch them spin that ball thing, that big wheelie ball thing, and they pick out the balls that have the numbers, and then that's how they pick the numbers, right?
Yeah, it's tangible proof.
Yeah, and you can see it, and so therefore you know it's not rigged, so on and so forth.
I don't know.
So when numbers games started popping up, that's what they kind of did. But that meant it was like a public affair, right? People would go and watch them pull the numbers, and then that would attract the attention of the authorities because this is illegal. They would get busted. So they stopped doing that, and they had to find a way to still give it some legitimacy and some, at least the appearance of being impartial. So what they did was they would base the day's betting numbers on something that was publicly available. So sometimes like some operations would use like New York Stock Exchange numbers, but the most common was what the day's winnings were at the racetrack. So I'm going to explain this because was a little hard for me. The game runners, including Stephanie, would use the last dollar digit from the win, show, and place bets, which are the three main numbers you get from the racetrack. So, for example, if the win number for the day was $1,200, then the first number would be 0 because that's the last dollar digit. If the place number was 105, then 5 would be the second digit. And if the show amount that day was $16, then the third number would be 6. So the winning 3 digits would be 056. And whoever chose those numbers would win. And if no one chose those numbers, as was often the case, then the house won, right? Then St. Clair would keep all of the cash for that day.
That's a hard game.
So I know. And I was like I don't know anything about betting at a racetrack. I don't even know what those racetrack numbers mean. So I had to really kind of do a deep dive just so I could personally understand it well enough to explain it.
Yeah.
And like these win, place, show, those mean things. I looked them up. Nobody needs to know them if you don't care about betting. But it is a little more complicated than you would think. But basically the gist of it is there were 3 publicly available winning numbers from every single day at the racetrack. And those would be the numbers that they would say were the winning numbers. So if you bet those winning numbers, you would win. And if you didn't bet them, you would lose your money. So I mentioned earlier that what was different about Queenie's operation was that they also ran what was called policy banking. Okay. So, at this time in history, Black people were just generally not allowed to have bank accounts.
Yeah, I believe that.
Banks wouldn't let them open up accounts. They didn't think Black people could, like, I don't know, have a bank account, I guess. So, what she ran was kind of a combination of a banking, investment, gambling operation. So people would bring their money to her, and her comptrollers would keep track of everything that they had given. And so they could make deposits, they could invest it. And like, this was the only way, basically like a stock exchange, right? Mm-hmm. You bet on a stock, and if it makes money, you make money. And if it loses, you lose, right? So the money ended up being controlled in her operation. But then she would be like, people could come and make deposits, but they could also make withdrawals from their account.
It's a whole lot
of money. So she became a de facto bank.
Yeah.
And it was one of the only ways that people could like make money too, in the way that we think of, like investments and stocks and things like that. They weren't allowed to invest in those things, so this was a way to make money without, necessarily having to sacrifice too much. Like $1 may not be she actually would take bets as little as 1 penny.
Jeez.
So if you just thought, I'm going to try this out because I need to I need to be able to invest my money and I want to be able to have something come back. Well, then a penny might not be the worst, Mm-hmm. So I as I was saying earlier, like what the odds were, like if everybody bet $1, then she came away with, no matter what, even if somebody won, she came away with $3,000 for the day. Mm-hmm. So even in an honest game, for every $1,000 that was wagered, they only gave out $600. So no matter what, they were keeping like 40% of whatever they took in for the day. And that would be why her operation had $500,000 in 1 year. Jeez. In like 1918. Lucas, what is $500,000 from 100 damn years ago today?
$500,000 in 1918 is the equivalent of $8,631,195.27 in today's dollars.
So, because she was very successful at this, she earned quite the reputation in Harlem and beyond. She was known as a no-nonsense, shrewd, tough woman, and the Mob Museum described her as being arrogant, sophisticated, and educated. She was also well known for having a very short temper and an extremely dirty mouth.
She sounds awesome.
So she would swear a fuck ton, so I think she'd be a fan of our program. She often directed her profanity at the police and white-owned businesses in Harlem, which was dangerous.
Very.
She actually would take out ads in the local Harlem newspapers to inform Black people of their legal rights, push them to exercise their voting rights, and she loudly and publicly decried police brutality against Black people in these newspapers. And she also set up a legal fund to help new French-speaking immigrants. So she was making a ton of money off the community, but she was also giving money back to the community too.
That's good.
But all of these things about her, the money that she made, which was considerable, her very abrasive attitude, her targeting of the police and of white business owners, her fighting for Black civil rights, all of that stuff obviously put her in a tough spot. She became a target.
Yeah. A loud moving target. Yeah.
A very loud, unapologetic moving target. I think probably one of the... There's the Rejected Princesses website, which we love. Mm-hmm. On their article about Stephanie St. Clair, they had scanned images of some of the ads and stuff that she put in newspapers. And one of them is this one where she's like dressed really sophisticated, like head to toe, like classic, beautiful 20s fashion, right? And then it's like, to whom it may concern. Please stop asking me out. It's annoying. I don't want to go out with you. If I needed a man, I would get a man. So leave me alone.
Oh, wow.
She was like, if you continue to approach me and send me letters, I'm going to print your name in the newspaper.
Oh, jeez. That's calling somebody out.
I love her so much. At least at the beginning.
Oh.
So she obviously needed some muscle, right? And of course her bookies were often muscle men too, right? But she needed like a dude who was going to be her guy. So she hired a man named Ellsworth, otherwise known as Bumpy, because he had a bump on his head, Johnson. So Bumpy Johnson became her right-hand man. He had, by the time he was 30, had spent nearly half of his life in prison.
Wow.
Yeah, he was quite the criminal,
Yeah.
and he was not afraid of violence. So he was a good, like, strong man for her. And for years, the two of them ran the Harlem numbers game. Initially, there were more players in Harlem, but eventually it was just them. They ran the entire operation in Harlem. And they were independent. So when I say independent, like, this is the time when the mafia is, like, a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And you've probably heard of the 5 families.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so like the 5 major crime families in New York had created a commission where they basically would like carve out territory and not fuck with each other's territory and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So she was completely independent of these big Italian or Jewish mafias. She was running her own shit and they were not allowed to come into her territory, and she didn't work with them and refused. So she really needed Bumpy to like be her muscle and be in charge of muscle.
Mm-hmm.
But the both of them were obviously pretty great at stamping out competition, but really generous for the community too. And they helped a lot of families and Black-run businesses. People could come to them if they needed to get money to buy a house, you know, because again, no banks.
Yeah.
So they were really community-oriented, though obviously they were still a criminal enterprise. So during this time, Stephanie is also publicly calling out police corruption. Even those advertisements I was telling you about, even in those, she would take out these giant full-page ads in like Harlem newspapers, and she would name specific officers who were involved in taking kickbacks from the Italian mob.
She's gonna get herself killed.
Yeah, this is super dangerous shit. Like publicly, and she was like not afraid to say that she was the one doing that. And at one point, the police, some of these officers, arrested her on these trumped up charges, and she actually spent 8 months in a workhouse because of what they said she did, which was not even true. So, but eventually, they were trying to crack down on corruption in general, you know, and not the police, but like the people in charge. And she ended up being asked to testify at a commission to like root out corruption in the police force. Mm-hmm. And she testified against these officers who had been taking kickbacks and who had arrested her. And more than a dozen of them ended up being fired from their job.
Oh, you don't see that happen every day either.
You do not. But again, more targets for her.
Mm-hmm.
So Stephanie was so financially successful that even after her operation paid for all of the muscle that she had, her 50 employees that were like bookies and comptrollers, and she would give out loans and all this stuff, she still single-handedly brought home a salary of $20,000 a year. And this is in the 1920s.
That's pretty good.
It really is. Lucas, how much would $20,000 be today?
In today's dollars, that would be $345,247.81.
But that doesn't last forever, right? Because Prohibition ended in the 1930s, and then all of a sudden, the United States was plunged into the Great Depression. And that became a real big problem for the Italian mafia, because they had been running those bootlegging operations and illegal liquor sales, and when Prohibition ended, it dried up all of that money immediately.
Yeah.
So,
well, a lot of the mafia too, they went to drugs.
Right.
Yeah, they started selling heroin and things like that.
So the Italian mafia is like looking to ways that they can make a lot of money fast. And they start eyeing up Stephanie St. Clair's operation in Harlem. And they want to basically force her to become like basically one of their underlings. That her operation would pay them.
She doesn't have to pay anybody.
Right. That's basically what she felt. But the five families had their eyes specifically on Stephanie St. Clair and the Harlem numbers game. And there was one white mobster in particular who was determined to take over Stephanie's territory. And that was a man named Dutch Schultz. Did you know him at all?
No.
He was a very famous mobster. I didn't know all of these guys' names. I knew one of them, so I'm going to talk about him a little more later. But Dutch Schultz was a really violent guy, and he targeted Stephanie St. Clair and all of her men and spared no expense at being an asshole to them. And in fact, Schultz put a hit out on Stephanie St. Clair. But when the hitman came to kill her, she pushed him into the closet, locked him in there, and then had him taken care of by her own bodyguards.
Ooh. Taken care of.
Yeah, that's exactly what it wrote. Taken care of. Under her orders, Stephanie and her men would retaliate, and they went to his storefronts. Remember, I talked about how the betting operations were often like in the backs of legitimate stores.
Mm-hmm.
So she knew where his storefronts were, and she sent her men to his storefronts, and they vandalized and destroyed a ton of them. And then she even gave the police the address of where he had his main operations, which resulted in a raid of his entire organization. And they arrested 14 of his employees, and they seized $2 million.
Ooh, that's a big arrest.
Yeah, in the 30s. So it was no secret that Stephanie St. Clair was the one who did this, that had orchestrated these attacks and this snitch, basically. And Schultz was pissed. And she was like, oh, I'm not just going to do this. I'm going to brag about it.
Oh, no.
So,
stop it, girl. Stop it.
Once again, she took out an ad in a newspaper and was like, how you like them apples, bitch? I don't know why she did these things, but I love it. But behind closed doors, this like mafia mob war was really taking its toll on Stephanie, and especially on her relationship with Bumpy. He really wanted to, like, he was like, they've got more power, they've got more guns, they've got more everything. Like, we are eventually going to get killed if we don't figure out a way to work with them. But she really didn't want to. And in the course of this whole war with Schultz, more than 40 people had been killed in the violence between the two gangs.
Yikes.
So Stephanie decided eventually that she just wanted out, and she handed over the reins of her operation entirely to Bumpy, under the like guise that she would get some money eventually. And Bumpy did what he initially wanted to do, which was he decided that they would work alongside the leader of the five families. So the guy who was in charge of the commission of the five families, his name was Charlie Lucky Luciano.
I know who he is.
Exactly. I was like, I know you're going to know this guy. So this meant that a portion of their numbers game's profits would obviously go directly to Luciano. So because of Stephanie's tip-off to the police, Dutch Schultz was in a shit ton of trouble, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when that whole operation got raided and his $2 million were seized, he became the focus of the district attorney, who was this guy who had campaigned on cutting down on the mafia and corruption. So this DA was ready, like just wanted to crucify Schultz. And Schultz's response was that he wanted to put out a hit on the DA. And that did not sit well with Lucky Luciano, who felt that if he did this and he actually succeeded in killing the DA, it would bring more attention to the mob not less. Like, it's not like it would intimidate the DA. It would just make them come down harder on the mob and the 5 families. Which is true.
Yeah.
Clearly, if you kill the fucking DA, everybody's going to know who did it. So before he could go ahead with his plans, Lucky Luciano put out a hit on Schultz.
Jeez.
So Schultz was shot in the stomach, but it didn't immediately kill him. He spent a few days on his deathbed, and while he was on his deathbed, he received a telegram from Stephanie St. Clair.
Uh-oh.
Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
It's fucking great. It made headlines across the country because this was so shady. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. Signed, Madam Queen of Policy.
Aww.
I love it.
She's like, bye, bitch.
As ye sow, so shall ye reap. So with her role in the numbers game diminished, right? She'd stepped aside. She turned her attention to being more of a community advocate. And she was working on political reform when she met a guy named Sufi Abdul Hamid. And he was a man of very dubious reputation. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Sufi Hamid because he is not great. His birth name was Eugene Brown.
Okay.
Not Sufi Abdul Hamid. But sometime in the early 30s, he converted to Islam, though he was never a part of the Nation of Islam. I think he was just a con man is really what he was.
Fan?
And then he claimed he was a Buddhist cleric, which Buddhism and Islam are not the same. He also claimed to be a bishop. And the full name and title he often went by was, and this is in all capital letters, His Holiness Bishop Amaru al-Mu'minin Sufi A. Hamid.
Whatever.
He claimed that he had been born in Egypt below the shadow of a pyramid. He was actually born in Lowell, Massachusetts. So Hamid was quite the character. He wore a mustache and a gold-lined cape, a purple turban, and Nazi military-style shirts. And he carried a dagger in his belt.
Okay.
He looked like Sinbad from the movies. It was a real weird look, except if Sinbad were also part Nazi.
No. Leave
Sinbad, I think, never wore a shirt or whatever. So
leave
imagine
Sinbad
if
out of it.
he doesn't deserve this. So maybe Hamid had started out with good intentions. He did advocate for the boycott of white-owned businesses that refused to hire black workers. He tried to get black workers to unionize, but we're going to get to more of that in a minute. But he was not so great when it came to Jews.
This is getting weird.
He would target Jewish store owners. He was openly anti-Semitic. He actually copied Hitler's message and would tell the black community that he was the only one who could stop the Jews from destroying their neighborhood. And Hamid actually had become nicknamed the Black Hitler.
Oh, no. I don't like this. I don't like that. I don't like this guy.
It's not good. And, he really wasn't all that great to the community, the black community either. He said he was trying to unionize black workers, but what he really did is he created his own private labor union, and unemployed black workers would have to pay him dues, and then after that he would try to get them a job. But
that's a scam.
But that's not how unions work.
No.
So he was a con man. It seems like maybe Stephanie was with him because he was advocating for black workers and whatever, but she had to have known about his anti-Semitism and this shady con business he was running with these unions. So I don't know why she was with him. She seems like she didn't take shit from anybody and wouldn't have stood for this, but she did. After all, she married him.
Yeah.
But in the end, he proved to be a scoundrel even to her. Hamid actually had an affair with a black fortune teller who went by the name Fu Futam and claimed that she was Asian. She was not. It was very weird.
Mm-hmm.
And the two of them stole some of Stephanie St. Clair's money, and they together were like starting all of these really bad businesses. One of them was like moving shit, like literal manure. It didn't work. And when Stephanie was done putting up with all of his bullshit, she decided enough was enough and decided to shoot him. She shot at him 3 times, but she missed each time.
Whoa.
But even though she didn't actually succeed in killing him, she was convicted of attempted murder and she went to jail. It says that she was sentenced to like 2 to 10 years. Some people said she served 10. Some people said she served 3. It was very unclear how much time she actually spent in jail.
But she did serve some time.
She did serve time, at least 3 years. That's the minimum amount for sure she served. So somehow, even though Stephanie had gone to prison and obviously had given up her ownership of her operation, she was still able to stash away quite a bit of money. And so her life after prison was pretty comfortable, if quiet. She continued, though, to be a vocal advocate for the Black community and was writing editorials in the newspaper about discrimination, civil rights, police brutality, and other things that faced Black communities. Her former partner, Bumpy Ellsworth, kept a bodyguard stationed to her all the way up until he died of a heart attack in 1968. Stephanie died just 18 months after Bumpy did in December of 1969. She was just a few days shy of being 73.
That's still fairly young.
I think so. Like, you know, it didn't even say what she died from, but I'm sure it was like, she led a pretty stressful life.
Yeah.
Stephanie St. Clair has been portrayed in a few films and television shows, which I mentioned earlier. I think she should have her own television show, but like she's been featured in like some crime shows. Like an episode will be about her. But the most notable media portrayal was a 1997 film called Hoodlum, but Hoodlum was actually not about her. It was about Bumpy. Which I was like, what? Well, how can you have a movie about Bumpy when he worked for her?
Yeah, that doesn't make it well, it makes sense because people feel like a female can't carry a movie.
Yeah, I guess they just didn't think she would be a good choice. But she was played by Cicely Tyson, and there are some stills that I saw online, and I thought, well, yeah, that was a perfect casting choice.
That's awesome.
But in 2017, HBO did announce that they were going to make a feature film about Stephanie St. Clair, but that was 3 years ago, and there's been not a single update. There's been nothing about production. There's been nothing about casting. So
bummer.
I think that deal might have fallen through.
Yeah.
Stephanie St. Clair, to me, is the definition of a complicated woman. She was a crime boss, but also an independent business owner. She was a community advocate, but also a criminal. She had fierce convictions, but a bad temper.
Obviously.
So, you know, there are whole fandoms and television shows and movies and museums and cultural lore devoted to the Italian mafia. And that's why people like Lucky Luciano and Al Capone are household names.
Oh, yeah.
Even 100 years later. So I believe that the notorious independent crime boss, Stephanie St. Clair, should be too.
I think so too.
I loved her story. I thought she was really fascinating and complicated. And not well known.
No.
I really do think that would make a really great HBO show, a la The Sopranos, but set in the Roaring 20s with a Black woman at the helm.
Oh, it would be amazing.
I would watch the shit out of that. The costumes, the decor, the
drama.
Mafia. So much drama.
The stabbing of the fork. Come on.
Well, and like, I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier or not, but they're not quite sure what the relationship really was between Bumpy and Stephanie. There may have been some romantic stuff happening as well as business. So that would be an interesting, plot arc to be putting in a television show. I used a couple of really cool websites. The Mob Museum was great. I found an archived article through the web archive on Court TV's website.
Oh, I love Court TV.
Yeah, called The Black Gangs of Harlem. And I mentioned earlier that I use Rejected Princesses. I use Wikipedia, blackpast.org, and Harlem World magazine.
Awesome. I am going to look up that Rejected Princesses because I love the artwork and the storytelling that they do in those.
And her art was actually really cool this time around. So she's sitting down at like a wooden table, with all these bets. And then Bumpy is behind her, like this big looming giant man, which he really wasn't, but his presence really was.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are there's like a white guy off to the side who's clearly, I think, Dutch Schultz. It's very good.
I like it.
And her husband Sufi, he's wearing this ridiculous turban and gold cape. Not that turbans are not ridiculous, but this guy was specifically ridiculous. That is.
We all have an ex that we pretend never happened.
Yeah, if I were Stephanie, it would be Sufi. Okay, are we ready for you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, lay it on me.
All right, I had a lot of fun with this one. It has one of our favorite things in it, champagne.
Ooh.
Have you heard of Barb-Nicole Clicquot?
I have not heard of her.
She is the Grande Dame of Champagne.
I love that there is such a title at all. How do I get it? I want to work towards it. This is a tutorial on how to get there,
On
right?
how to get there, yes.
Do?
This is step by step.
Okay.
We are going to be Doms of Champagne.
I want to be a Dom of Champagne.
So Barb-Nicole her maiden name was Ponsardine. These are French names. I know that I'm fucking them up, so don't come at me, y'all.
She probably do better than me. Remember the butchering I did?
Oh, yeah.
Ugh.
At least these people have individual names. It's not the Jean again. She was born in 1777.
Year after we had independence.
Yeah. She was the daughter of a rich textile industrialist in Reims, France. She was not wanting at all. Her family was very wealthy. She was raised in the years leading up to the French Revolution, and she said that her childhood was deeply influenced by the political leanings of her father. Her father's name was Ponce Jean Nicolas Philippe Ponsardine.
That's such a long name.
Yeah, I feel like somebody just grabbed a paper out of a baby book and just said, "This is your name," and it was all the names.
Yeah, it's just all 5 names.
He was deep into politics and matters of banking and business. With his connections and his ability to manage finances very well, his family was able to get through the French Revolution without losing their home or their estate or their wealth, which is pretty impressive.
Yes, it is.
So they had a family that lived next door to them. It was the Clicquot family. The father's name was Philippe, and he was the owner of the whole estate, and he was also in the textile business. He had a son named Francois, and him and Barb-Nicole grew up living next to each other. Philippe Clicquot, like I said, he was in the textile business. He was actually like a direct competitor with her own father.
Oh.
So like these guys live next to each other and they're competing with each other in sales and in business. So they came together as 2 heads of the household, and they decided it would be good business if they arranged a marriage between their children. It's like, why be competitors if we can own it all in the end, is what they thought.
Yeah, this is a little weird too.
So
like they want to become a monopoly by merging their families.
So Barb-Nicole and Francois, they accepted the arranged marriage, and both were married in 1798. She was around 21 years old at the time. They had one daughter named Clementine, which I love that name.
Yeah.
Even though it was an arranged marriage and it was like a business deal. Francois had been Barb-Nicole's friend growing up throughout their life. So they actually were comfortable being married with each other, and they created like a real partnership between each other. Francois treated her very kindly, and he liked to have her, like everything that they did, he always wanted to have her by his side, not putting her below him or above him. He wanted her to be equal.
That's really pretty progressive for the time.
He shared with her that instead of taking over his father's textile industry, which was supposed to be the deal, like that's what his father wanted. That's like the whole point of their marriage. Exactly. He wanted to grow his family's secondary wine business. And so up to that point, the Clicquot family's wine business was pretty small. They had their booming textile business, so their selling of wine was kind of on the back burner. And they would always be like, oh yeah, we sell wine. Like maybe we should get on that. They sold still and sparkling wine. They would often buy wine from other producers and then export as an as-needed basis. Philippe had no intention of expanding this at all. He was actually thinking of getting rid of it. But Francois had a different dream and idea for that business. So he wanted to begin to expand their wine business at probably the worst time ever. France was about to plunge into the Napoleonic Wars.
Oh, yeah, not a great time.
Not a great time. Yeah, no, terrible, terrible time. But despite his father's advice, Francois began learning the wine trade, and he wanted Barb-Nicole to be by his side and learn as well. So what he learned, she learned, standing right there next to him. Francois knew nothing about the winemaking business. So it's like, why would you want to do this? Like, I want to make wine. It's like, well, yeah, you have it and it's in your family's hands, but do you know how to do this?
Yeah, maybe he just liked drinking wine and thought, I could be good at this.
But it was a different story for her. It actually ran in her family. One of her grandmothers had been part of a winemaking operation generations earlier. So the trade was in her family. So she was more than happy to learn about the industry from the ground up with her husband. They put all their energy, time, and money into the wine and champagne business. And despite their best efforts, I mean, what do you think happened?
I think it didn't go well.
It did not. It stalled. And it came close to damn near collapsing on itself. And it was rough. It was about 6 years of learning and 6 years into their marriage as well to try to get this operation off the ground, which 6 years is a long time to struggle with a business.
Yeah, I am familiar with that problem.
After this 6 years of doing this, Francois suddenly gets sick with a fever, and his health gave in, and in 12 days he was dead.
Oh no!
Yeah,
I didn't see that coming.
Yeah,
Plot twist.
It was most likely typhoid.
Oh yes,
which was spreading at the time, and
very contagious.
Yeah, Barb-Nicole and Francois's father were in shock. Like they didn't think. He had a fever, he wasn't feeling good, and then bam, he died. And to make things worse, people in their area started to spread rumors around the town that his death had been a suicide because of his failing business. And that hurt her deeply, and his father.
And was there any credence to that? Like, were they just making shit up?
People were just making shit up.
Wow, that's real shitty.
So both her and the father-in-law are devastated by Francois's fast death. His father just wanted to end the wine business. He wanted to get it out of the way. Like, not only was it kind of a reminder of his son not succeeding, it was a reminder of like his son didn't listen to him. It was putting a bad name throughout the town. He just wanted to get rid of it. But she had a different idea. She didn't want to let that happen. It had been not just his dream, it had been their dream. And something that she and her husband had bonded over, and she wanted to see it through. So she approached her father-in-law with a deal. She goes to him and she says she's going to risk her inheritance. She'll put all of her wealth on the line, if Philippe will give her an investment to continue the business. If it goes under, he'll absorb her estate when her parents die.
Whoa, that's quite the gamble.
Yeah. And like, honestly, he said yes, because that was the whole reason he married the two of them. Like, he wanted to combine the finances. So in the end, he'll get what he wants. And he actually said that he had appreciated her drive to still try. And that kind of also gave him a reason to give her the money. He had one condition, though. She had to start an apprenticeship with a well-known winemaker named Alexandre Fournier for 4 years. So she has to do this learning because, of course, she still doesn't know how to do the whole wine business. So she's got to learn how to make it.
Which is smart.
Very. I mean, you go to school to get a job, right? It's like, maybe go to school to learn how to make the wine that you want to make.
Yeah, or you learn it from somebody who's professional.
So for 4 years, she studied and tried to make what was now a slowly dying wine industry grow. Sadly, she failed again.
Oh no, I thought this was the one. This is the one that takes off.
You thought the roller coaster was going up and then it just goes down. Yeah, she continued to not grow and lose money pretty badly. She went to her father-in-law a second time asking for money. And she said, I know I can do this. Please give me money. I can do this. And he gave it to her.
Wow, this guy is supportive, I guess. We're a little bit crazy.
So the Napoleonic Wars are coming to an end, and she's facing bankruptcy if she can't pull something off with her business. So after doing some studying of the market, she decides to take a huge business gamble. She finds out that the Russian market is about to open as soon as the Napoleonic Wars are coming to an end. The wine that she was making was like an extremely sweet champagne. It's kind of a different style of champagne that she knew was something that sold well on the Russian market, but it was hard for them to get, especially since commercial shipping like had been crippled by the wars.
Mm-hmm.
So she decided to commission her own ship. She loaded it up with all of her product, and she smuggled it out of France, like in a mass amount of bottles of her best stuff. She shipped it to Amsterdam. And there she was going to let it wait until peace was declared, which she knew was going to be happening soon. So as soon as peace was declared, the shipment had to go ahead to sail and make it to Russia. So by having all of this like kind of prepackaged and sitting and waiting, the shipment beat all of her competitors by weeks.
That is so fucking smart. I was like, this is very shrewd. Like, this is a shrewd business move.
It's like jumping at the before the gun goes off, in the race, and then winning the race.
Well, I was just thinking about, like, we've been doing this phase 2 opening, right? And there were a lot of places that haven't opened yet and aren't planning to open until like June 2nd or 3rd or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Because they weren't ready. They didn't get the barriers. They didn't remove part of their seating and so on and so forth. So, places like where you work were ready to go.
Oh yeah.
We're able to open within an hour of the announcement.
Yeah, very true. Oh, I didn't think about it like that. Yeah. So her champagne sold and debuted in Russia, and a couple bottles were sent to none other than the Tsar of Russia, Tsar Alexander. And he tried it and did like this big, profound announcement that he was no longer going to drink anybody's champagne but this one.
Oh,
and I know. So there's nothing like being backed by a huge political leader, right?
Yeah.
He actually, this like 5-star rating that he gave of the champagne, he shares it with his court. So these are like people that are from all different kinds of like places around the world. And so all of them are trying it. They all like it. So then they're all telling other people. So word starts to spread really fast about how good this product is. So she went from struggling, almost losing everything, and to being known internationally, which is crazy.
God, that is crazy.
But then she kind of ran into a problem, though. So suddenly there's a demand for her champagne. And then she was like, oh, shit, I got to make a ton of this. And I got to do it now. She didn't think about that. And it was daunting to her at the time because champagne was really tedious to make. And it was actually pretty wasteful the way it was made. I don't know if you're familiar with how champagne was made back in the day.
I just thought it was like the same way wine was made.
The reason why it's wasteful, even more wasteful than winemaking, is so you have your white wine and you add a little bit of sugar and live yeast into the bottle, and then you ferment it again, which is called secondary fermentation. I know Amanda is aware of what that is, but I know some people out there don't know. So bear with me. I'm going to go through some champagne facts.
That's like what I did with the numbers game. I was like, I got to explain what this is because I did not know.
So when you were doing that, I was like, oh my God, I have a similar thing that I'm going to be doing too. So the yeast eats the sugar, which creates alcohol, much like how it does with beer. And it creates carbon dioxide, aka the lovely bubbles that we like and enjoy in champagne. When the champagne is ready, the bottle, however, has like this murkiness growing on the side of the inside of the bottle and on the bottom.
Not attractive.
And on a huge sediment on the bottom, which is the dead yeast that has been all eaten up.
Nope.
And so
that's not cute.
No, when you pour it, the champagne's like cloudy and it's not so pretty. So the way people were making it is they would slowly pour champagne into a second bottle, leaving the dead yeast and about half of the product in the other bottle. So it would take 2 bottles to pour 1 clear bottle of champagne.
Okay, they couldn't figure out how to just refine it?
Well, and then 2, they were trying to, as they were trying to put it into this second bottle, they were losing the carbon dioxide, which was making it flat. And it was like crippling the lovely bubbles that are in the champagne because it's disturbing that carbonation that you just spent all this time building up.
Well, and anytime there's oxygen, so whenever they're doing that pouring process, all of that's just getting oxygenated.
Yeah.
Which makes which reduces the carbonation level, but also makes it go bad fast.
Yes.
So when that oxygen gets in that bottle is only going to last like 2 weeks, maybe.
So Barb-Nicole realizes like this process needs improvement, especially if she wants to start banging out, her shipments faster. And mainly so that she could keep more of the finished product to fill in the demand. So this is what she ends up doing. She invents a new process. It's really simple, but it's brilliant. Instead of transferring from bottle to bottle, she invents a method of turning the bottles upside down and gently agitating the yeast by swirling it around. And then she built this table, or she took a table and she built it so that it was up against the wall, like at an angle. And she put all these holes in it. And she put the champagne bottles in the hole so that they're facing downward. And then she would slowly, one by one, twist the bottles and all of the yeast would fall off the sides of the bottles down into the top of the neck of the bottle. And so that would solidify. So then they would just open the bottle and pull the yeast out, leaving a perfectly pristine, clear bottle of champagne.
That's smart. It just still seems like a lot of work.
Well, this process that she invented is called riddling, which I had heard of this process with beer, and it's called racking, I thought.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I thought it's really simple, but it works. And so then...
It's better than wasting and oxygenating all your shit.
Yeah. And they would taste it a little bit, they would cork it, and then they would do what they call caging it for a little while, which is another little bit of... what do you call it? Like letting it rest or something. And then it was ready for sale. So this method created actually is still used by champagne makers today.
You go, girl. You created a method to make champagne everybody uses. Who knew? Not me.
So not only did she improve the quality of the champagne, she was able to produce it way faster. So she had found like her edge in the market and her business just took off. She was able to hire a full staff to help make her product. And she was known as being a good and fair employer. She was a really good boss. Not one of her employees gave out her riddling technique, even though competitors were like asking and bribing and trying to figure out how she was doing this. And not one of them said what they were doing.
That's loyalty and surprising.
Yeah. The fact that she's able to have people have her back like that, because I don't know, somebody dangles $1 million in front of you. You're like, yeah, here you go. Here's the secret recipe.
Here's the secret.
And she was able to keep an edge on the market for years because people couldn't figure out what she was doing. And she achieved her dream that her and her husband had always wanted. And she actually turned her business not only into an empire in France, but as a global empire. I got a lot of information from this book called The Widow Clicquot, which was written by Tilar Mazzeo. And I'm going to do a little excerpt from his book. He said, the invention of riddling allows the mass production of an artisanal and luxury product, just not at the tiny quantities that they were dealing with before. Barb-Nicole begins exporting wine around the world in large quantities and is known as being one of the great businesswomen of her century. She's actually considered to be the first international businesswoman ever.
Ooh, wow,
Yes.
That's quite the title.
International. Even though, like, with all her success, she's exporting her champagne all around the world, she never left France, which I thought was kind of weird. But
she never even traveled?
No, she did not leave.
Whoa, yeah, that is weird.
She never remarried, although it was said that she liked to flirt with the handsome young men that worked for her company.
Yeah, that sounds good. That's right. That's exactly what you should do.
Yeah. Your boss is hitting on you. Isn't that an HR problem?
That is an HR problem. It's a good thing HR didn't exist in France in this time.
Yeah. Well, being the businesswoman that she was, she realized that if she remarried, because of the laws back then, she would have to relinquish control of her business to her husband.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
No, hell no.
It's never worth it.
I was shocked.
Yeah, like if you are basically seen as not a full human being and this dude he gets to just have whatever is yours. Like she built that company. It's hers. It should be only hers. Not some dude who met her and, probably charmed her way into the bedroom.
Mm-mm.
With the understanding that he would take over her wealth.
So Barb-Nicole died in July of 1866, and at the time of her death, she was producing and exporting 750,000 bottles a year.
Wow, that is a lot.
That's a lot of champs.
Wow, 750,000.
Right? And so when news of her death was published, she was hailed as La Grande Dame de Champagne, which is the name that was given to her by her friends, which is the Dame of Champagne. I love it so much.
I love it too. Can you tell me what year was this she died again?
So it's 1866, and she's born in 1777.
So she was almost 100?
1777 to 18. Yeah, Jesus Christ.
Wow. I was gonna say, I at first I thought you said she died in 1897. I was like, oh man, that's the year that my girl was born.
Oh no,
but very close though.
Yeah. Well, her shares of her company went to her daughter Clementine and to her granddaughter, which I the granddaughter had this big, long, grand French name that I was not going to type out, so I didn't do it. And the company began to be headed by a man who she had brought in as one of her partners. And fun fact about her champagne, during the time when she was exporting around the world, some of the ships had wrecked. I mean, it happens. It's little loss in product. And some of the bottles had fallen to the bottom of the ocean in different areas. So slowly through the decades, the bottles have been being resurfaced. And many of them are actually still in good condition. They're drinkable.
Wow, you'd probably get real wasted on that.
Something about the depth and like how cold it is down there. They actually have started a process now of putting champagne at the bottom of the ocean to see the difference of like how it ages because of these bottles they found of her champagne and them tasting good.
Well, okay.
Actually, a bottle of nearly 200-year-old Veuve Clicquot broke the record for being the most expensive champagne ever sold. In 2011, a bidder paid 30,000 euros for one bottle of champagne.
Jesus Christ. That is a lot of money.
That is so much money. What? The oldest bottle is considered priceless, and it's actually held in the Veuve Clicquot house collection. So if me and you want to buy a bottle now, depending on the style, they offer like a rosé style, they offer an extra dry. It's going to run us about $60 to $80 a bottle.
That's not as bad as I thought it was going to be like a $400 bottle of wine. And I was like, well, we'll never do that. But if you and I wanted to actually go in on a bottle, I would do it.
I would do it too. I want to try it.
Yeah, like if we both spend like $30 each,
that's
split that bottle, tell everybody else they can just do their own thing. We're not sharing.
This is our Dame Champagne.
That's right. We earned this Dame Champagne.
So the company still produces today. In 2011, it appointed Cécile Bonnefond as the second female president of the company because Barb-Nicole was the first one. The company also sponsors a Business Woman Award, and this award is given out annually. It honors successful businesswomen around the world, recognizing enterprising spirit, courage, determination, and innovation of women in business.
That's cool.
And I'll end with a little blip from Barb-Nicole. This is something that she had written to her granddaughter Clementine. She called her Clementine, but the granddaughter had like a big long first name, Marie Clementine something, but she called her Clementine. The world is in perpetual motion, and we must invent the things of tomorrow. One must go before others. Be determined and exacting, and let your intelligence direct your life. Act with audacity.
I love act with audacity.
I know. And this was a wonderful story. And I've actually seen that label, the Veuve Clicquot. I've seen it in some places. And I'm really happy I know the story behind it now. And I'm definitely going to get a bottle someday.
For real, let's go do it. Let's go to like Total Wine and see if they've got it.
Oh, I'm sure they do. Because I've seen the label. If I show you the label, you'd recognize it.
I actually, like when you were saying the name, I think I've seen it. Like if I
yellow label.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I bet I've seen it before too. And I bet I was like, well, that's some rich champagne.
Too rich for my blood.
So yeah, let's do it. Let's get a bottle of champagne. Maybe when we cap off the end of this season.
Oh, that'd be great. I got my info from one of my favorite places to get information, Smithsonian Magazine. An article written by Natasha Galing called The Widow Who Created the Champagne Industry. That book that I had mentioned offered a ton of information called The Widow Clicquot by Tyler Mazzezo. The Guardian, Town and Country magazine, because of course they drink champagne, and a blog called Premier Champagne by Ross Taylor gave me all of the information about riddling techniques, which I wanted to make sure I didn't mess it up. So hopefully I didn't. And that's
nice
that.
work. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed
Love
our
that.
very smart businesswomen, even if one was a
Yes.
criminal businesswoman.
You know, we did it again. We hit that thread of businesswomen now.
Yes, we didn't anticipate it, but here we are.
And I'm just going to keep saying that over and over. La Dame de la Champagne.
I like the way you say that.
Now I want champagne. Fuck.
Me too. You know what? It's Memorial Day. We can do it.
Let's do. All right.
Well, everybody, thank you for listening. And thank you also to Lucas for helping, especially on this episode. We did have some technical issues, so he's going to get lots of different tracks today. So thank you, Lucas, for working hard at putting this together and making us sound good.
Yes. And thank you to Jennifer Finch from L7 for providing our theme music. Shirley.
And you should definitely go out and listen to the album that they just put out, but also the album that Shirley is from, which is called Hungry for Stink.
Thank you for listening. Till next time.
Till next time. Goodbye.